Hey folks, welcome to part one of a multi-part video series, where I'm going to use CloudFormation to build out a secure S3 bucket. I took my inspiration for this series from this great post by Josh at Fugue, walks through in really great, easy to understand detail about the different components that are involved in creating an S3 bucket and controlling who has access to that bucket. And when I read through this, I thought, hey, you know what? We read a lot of CloudFormation. Let's translate some of these concepts into one or more CloudFormation templates. So this is kind of my inspiration. I'll share a link to this in the comments of the video so you can have a look at it. It's a good article. It's a great resource. Today, I thought we would start by doing a couple things. So I'm already logged into my AWS account. I'm in our demo account, and you can see that block public access is not enabled at the account level. A really easy way to help protect ourselves from accidentally making something public is to enable this. You can enable it at the account level. You can enable it on the individual buckets. I'm going to do it in the account level today. So this is the first thing we're going to work on. We're going to do this through a simple Bodo script. And then the second thing that I wanted to do was set up encryption. So we're going to create a customer managed CMK, and we're going to associate that with the encryption configuration of an S3 bucket that we're going to create. So that's kind of part one, what I wanted to get through. All right, so let's hop over to the editor and build this out. So I've already put my account ID in here. I'm going to need that because I want to do this at the account level, not the individual bucket level. Let me clear that, get it out of the way for the time being. And we're not going to do anything too fancy here. I'm going to create a main function, and then we're just going to call that function. And from here, I'm going to set up a session. So Bodo3 session, and I want to use a profile that I have set up on my laptop here to connect to that demo account. The reason I'm doing this is because we don't actually have IAM users configured in that AWS account. We use roles to connect, and I've got my AWS CLI set up, and the role definition is defined there. So I want to make sure that I'm using the right profile so that I'm connecting to the appropriate account. So now I've got the session set up. I'm going to say client equals session.client, and we want to connect to S3 control. And again, we're doing this because we want to set a setting. We want to set the setting. There we go. That makes sense, for the entire AWS account, not an individual S3 bucket. So we're going to connect to S3 control. And we need our exception, which I just always steal from here because I can never remember this. And like I mentioned, nothing too fancy, print error. You could do something a lot more complex than this, but this is going to serve our purpose. Right. And now we have to look at the call that we're going to make to S3 control. So here's our call. And if we scroll down, we can see there's no return data. All we're going to do then is we're just going to say client.put public access block. Grab this configuration item, and I'm just going to cut and paste these, because we want to use all the policies. And if you've ever seen one of my Twitch streams, you know that I often have issues with getting the camel case correct in some of the CloudFormation templates we write on Twitch. So I'm just going to copy these, and hopefully I can't mess the copies up, right? In theory. So we'll get those set. And then the last piece is we need to pass our account ID, again, because we're setting this at the account level. So I think that's all we need, right? Like I mentioned, really simple. So let's run this. No, hold on. Run that again. Okay, so we've got MFA set up for our role assumption. So let me just grab that off of my phone here. I always do that. Okay. And there we go. Exit 0. So let's go back over to our AWS account and refresh. So step one in our process is finished. So at this point, we've got the account level settings for block public access done. Okay. By no means the only thing you want to do here, but as I mentioned already, it's a great way to kind of help protect ourselves from ourselves and not make any kind of silly errors that would end up opening up data that we otherwise want to have or to be kept private. Okay, so that's step one. What I want to do now is change to CloudFormation. Okay, so let's go over here and we'll say, over to the documentation for this. And we'll do this as YAML because we want to write YAML. And I'm going to separate this into a couple different templates. So let's close these down. We don't need these right now. And actually, let's get rid of this too. No, I want to create a file. So we're going to create two files. We're going to create a file for KMS. So this will actually create the key, set the key policy. And then we're just going to call, let's call this bucket. Okay, so two files. And then we're going to deploy this through, we're using GitLab for this. So we're going to check all these templates in. We'll check them in and get them deployed that way. Okay, so let's start here. Let's say server-side encryption, KMS S3. Okay. I'm going to put a placeholder here for parameters. We'll come back to that. And then what we need to do here is define our resource, right? Our key. So I'm going to just call this, let's just call it key 0 to keep it simple. And we know this is going to be I think it's just KMS key. We're going to check this in a second. Actually, let's jump over there now. I started with S3, but I really need the key first. So here's the key, and we're going to create both a key and an alias. So KMS key, and you can see what we need to put. Now, not all of this is required, but we're going to use it. So type properties, and we're going to give a description, right? I don't know about you, but within, I wanted to say a couple days, but maybe even a couple hours, if I came back to this, I would forget what this is for. So we're going to, let's get rid of this little down there. We're going to just call this KMS key for S3 demo. Enabled, I'm going to say true. And enable key rotation is also true. Key policy, we do need to come up with our key policy. I'm going to come back to that, so we'll just put lights went out. Hang on a second. Motion sensor in the office here. And of course, it won't come back on when I want it to. That's funny. All right, well, let's keep doing it. I'm sure the light's going to come back on here at some point. And we're going to set our key usage. And I'm going to cut and paste this. We're going to call this encrypt and decrypt, right? We want to use it for both operations. And we're also going to set a pending window in days. So what this does is, you can see right here, it essentially creates a waiting period. From the moment we delete that CMK from the CloudFormation template before it actually gets removed from our environment. We're going to do a couple things here just to protect ourselves against accidental deletions. So the first thing is pending window in days. We're going to set that to 7. We'll use the, actually, let's use this, okay? We'll call number of days just to demonstrate this. And we'll say default is 7, and then we'll use a reference back to it. Okay, num of days. That way we can just change it up here. You know, better way to do it. Pending in days, and then tags. So one of the things that we always do, I'm going to try to get the light back on here, see if it comes back. It's so funny. If I didn't want the light on, There we go. If I didn't want the light on, it would stay on all the time. There we go. Okay. One of the things that we do is to set tags, right? And remember, tags are essentially metadata. And we have a set of tags that we kind of use as standards. So we're going to set those up. And I know these don't exist right now, but we'll add them in a second. If you've watched any of the Twitch videos or anything in the channel, you most likely would have seen these already. I kind of do the same thing every time. Now we're going to go up here, and I usually like to do something like this. Stack parameters, tag parameters. I don't know why I do this, just I find it easier later on if I'm trying to find something specific. So let's say owner, and the default value for this is, we'll just make it our company, and then I'll say owner email. Forgot my own domain for a second. Okay, that's not right. String is here. That's the default value. And then environment, we're going to do something a little different. We're going to say that it's still a string. The default value is development, and we're going to allow a couple specific values here. We're going to say development and production, right? So there's all of the tags that we need for this. Now, we still need our key policy. So the key policy is required. The key policy is an example of a resource-based policy. This is an additional layer of protection on the key, right? Who can do what on the key. Now, we're not going to dive into the key, the exact best practices for this. To keep it simple, I'm going to simply use this first statement here. And then actually, we're not even going to do administration of the key if it will let us avoid it, because we're just going to allow all KMS actions for IAM users in the account. Okay? If you're doing this in your own account, you would want to make sure that this is locked down a little tighter than what we're going to do. But this will at least get us the key up and running, and we can use it for the demo. We're going to delete it anyways after. So key policy starts with version, and the version's always the same, 2012 1017, and we don't need the ID, so we're going to say statement. Okay, and just like every other policy, effect, actually I shouldn't say like any other policy, since this is a resource policy, a key policy, we do have to define the principal. And we are going to essentially do this. Okay. And that is basically saying allow all IAM users in this account to, whoops. That's what I want. Okay. To perform the following actions, and we're going to say KMS. I actually like to do it like this. I just find it easier to read. So KMS, all actions on KMS, and in this case, we're also going to use all KMS keys. Okay. Again, just for demonstration purposes, maybe in one of the later videos in this series, we'll actually lock this down to give you a better example. But I think for tonight, just to get the key going and the alias set up, I think that's more important. Okay. The other thing I want to do is I want to use a special parameter or a special attribute here called Deletion Policy. And I'm just going to set this to retain. And I like to do this with really what I'll call high value resources. Now, I know we already set a pending window in days earlier on to say, if we do delete this stack, don't delete the key for 7 days. But I'm overkilling here, and I'm basically saying, hey, you can delete everything in the stack, but retain this key. Obviously, you would want to do something like this in a real environment. So just kind of, again, to do some best practice, we're going to put it in here. Okay. The other thing that I like to do also is an alias. So we're just going to call it alias 0, and this is going to be, I think it's just KMS alias. We're going to use another attribute called depends on. We can't create the alias until the key exists. So remember that CloudFormation will try to deploy resources in parallel. And this might work out okay, but I like to use the depends on attribute as a way to kind of control it a little more. And then we're going to say properties and look at the alias, really just a couple things. So the first thing is alias name, and it's always going to start with alias, and I'm just going to call it S3 demo. Okay. You can call it whatever you'd like, really. Actually, you know, let's hard code it. Okay. And then our target key ID is referring to the key that we're going to create in this earlier step. All right, so that's that. We are going to need to refer to this key in our S3 creation. So let's find S3 again. I can't remember what it expects. So if we go to bucket, and then there's bucket encryption. I always forget I think it's under bucket encryption. Let's go here. Okay, so there's that. And then we've got a couple layers deep. There's where we're going to refer to KMS. So this is going to look for the KMS key ID. So we need to make sure that we're passing the KMS key ID as the output for the or the output in the KMS template. Okay. So let's go back over here, find KMS again, and we want to look at key, and we can go down here and look at return values. And if we do a ref here, we get the logical ID. Okay. I don't know if that's exactly what we want based on the last page. So I'm going to use the intrinsic function get attribute, and I'm going to output from that. I can use the key ID or the ARN. I'm going to spit out the key ID just because it's the first one on the list. I think based on the documentation we just looked at, you could use either, but we're going to do that. So you go to outputs, and I'm just going to call it key 0. We're going to say the value of this output is get attribute key 0.arn, and we'll give it a name. And we are going to, actually, sorry, it's like this. Here. Export has a name, and we're going to use another pseudo parameter like we used earlier on, and we're going to say AWS stack name, and we'll just call it key. Okay, let's make it a little better. S3 demo key is what we'll call it. That way it'll stand out for us. So at this point, we've got, in theory, a key, an alias. We're not going to use the alias here, but I like to create an alias. I find it easier to remember, and you might use this in some other solution later, and you could call the alias instead of having to remember the ARN or that unique ID. And then if everything works out well, then we've got our output. We need to set this up. I always forget the structure of these. So, well, we can get started with this. We'll fill in the blanks. We're going to validate the template using just the simple AWS CloudFormation validate command. Okay, so you know what? Nah, this isn't going to work the way I want. So just bear with me a sec. Actually, I can do this easier over here. I'm already in our demo environment, and I've got a bunch of demos in here. So we can actually just borrow from one of these. Okay, so this is what we want. I'm just going to grab it all. We're obviously not going to use anything close to this, but this is simpler. We set some global variables at the top. Okay. Owner, email, environment, and profile. And then we've got our deployments. So we'll just chop everything we don't need. There's our KMS validate. We've called it KMS, so we don't have to change that. The rest of this can go away. And then we've got deployment. Now, we're not going to worry about that. There's our KMS deployment. We'll come back and check to make sure that's all right, but let's blow all this away. All right, so we're just going to create, how do we want to do this? Let's do it like this. We'll put demo in front of it. Again, just to be able to find it very quickly, we can do it like a stack filter later on. Okay, so there's our stack name, and then we've got our deploy command, and we pass it in the stack name. We're going to create a change set here. We want to validate that change set before we run the actual deployment. We've also got no fail on an empty change set, so it'll just create regardless. Setting some tags using a profile, and then we're going to set termination protection on the stack once it's done. Okay. So let's add this file. Actually, let's just do this. Get rid of these. So there's buckets. Oh, we do have to go down here because I've got these two files that I also want to add. So let's see what happens. First commit. What did I miss? It's not letting me commit. Oh, yep, there it goes. Okay. And then let's push this. All right. So if we go back and we have a look now at demo, and here's our S3, and we've got an error. So let's see what we've got. Validation failed. Oh, spelling mistake. There we go. Just like I said, right? So we've got default. That must be in our parameters section. So let's have a look here. Yeah, can't spell. There we go. Try it again. All right, so we made it through the validation, and KMS is deploying. So let's go over to CloudFormation and see what we got here. So if we just filter with demo, there we go. Let's go here, change set. So it's generated or change set. We always like to use change sets. It's a great way to, make sure that what you would expect is going to happen, or what you want to happen is going to happen. So in this case, we don't have keys, we don't have an alias, so you can see the action is add. Okay, this is really more important once you've done this once and you're going to run a stack update. Really kind of watching over here to make sure that the resources aren't being replaced unless you intended them to be replaced. So we always like this. It saved us a couple times in situations. So we're going to execute this, and we'll see what happens. Okay, no immediate failure, which is usually a good sign. The key process takes a little bit of time, I find. So if it doesn't fail right away, I think we're going to let this run in the background and start working on the configuration of that S3 bucket. Okay. We'll just give it another minute and see what it does. Usually if there's a typo or something obvious here, it would fail right away. Yeah, looks good. Okay, let's make it a pretty big assumption that we've got that right. And we're going to go down here and look at S3 buckets now. And you can see we've got a lot of different options. I think we're going to dive into these options as we go through the rest of the series. But as I mentioned for today, we're really concerned about setting up our bucket and doing default encryption. So we're gonna set this up. So it'll be a pretty simple template to start. We'll set our description again. All right, create. All right, and just like we did before, parameters as a placeholder, resources as a placeholder, and outputs. And I know that I'm going to use the same parameters for this, so I'm just going to cut and paste those and drop them here. Okay. We'll probably create some more, but we'll leave it for that for now. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a bucket. So we're just going to call it bucket 0. Type is AWS S3 bucket, and properties is where we'll get into the details. Like I said, we're not going to worry about any of these. So let's look at bucket encryption. So the first thing I'm going to do, cut and paste, and then go here. And you can see why I like to cut and paste, because some of these are pretty long. So we're going to do that. And then we've got now a list here. So we're going to do that. And we're going to go here. Okay. And now we've got another component. We're going to do that. And now we've got the actual server-side encryption default settings. So we've got our KMS master key. Okay, we'll just tag that with to-do again, like we did in the last one. And we've got SSE algorithm. And we are going to use here AWS KMS. So let's save this and go back over to CloudFormation and see what happened here. So we've got new events. Good, we're good, okay? If we go over to KMS now and have a look, we'll see our key. All right, we've got a bunch of keys in here. You can see we do a lot of demos and stuff, but this is the key I just created. I think it was called S3 demo, wasn't it? Now I don't remember. Outputs. Oh, we didn't do an output, so we can look at resource. Yeah, S3 demo. So there is that key. Okay, so we drill down in here. We can see the policy we created, pretty wide open, but it'll work for now. The tags, and we've also enabled key rotation. Okay, so we're good there. What we need to do now is get the ID that we outputted from that KMS stack. So what I like to do is I like to do this, stack parameters, and we're just going to call it KMS stack. It's a type of string, and the default is, what did we call it? Demo KMS development. Demo KMS development. Now, this is where we're going to use another intrinsic function. We're going to essentially import the export value into here. Right? So let's, I can never remember the import command too. So we're going to go back over here and we're going to have a look in one of these and see if I have an example of it. There's KMS. Let's look at the SMM component again here. It looks like in this case, we were just using parameters for the inputs. Okay, so what we could do is we could do this will give us what we need. And that's what I want right there. Okay, so in this case, we want to say KMS stack, and I don't remember what we did what we called the output. So let's go back and have a look. We just called it demo key. So we're going to grab that and demo key. Okay. Now I don't know if we need to add anything else. So let's just have a look and see. We'll go through the, if I jump back to the main S3 document here, really all I want to know is what else is required. So you can see for each of these properties, required, yes or no. So we're just looking for anything else. We're not going to give it a bucket name. We're going to let CloudFormation assign that name for us. So here's that, what we set at the account level. Okay. We could set this in the bucket as well, just to make sure. But since it's done at the account level, we don't need it. Maybe come back to that. No. Okay, tags, versioning control, no website. So let's set up the tags. And again, I'm just going to take these from here because they're exactly the same. And we know that's going to go right there. All right. Now, you know what? Thinking about this, block public or public access block configuration. Let's add this. And the reason that I'm thinking we should add it is because what if you find yourself in a situation where maybe it's not set at the account level? You could just do this in CloudFormation. I can't remember the structure if it's a list or not. So let's go back up here. It is not. Okay. So again, this is going to look just like we did in the Bodo script earlier on, but I'm going to do the same thing and grab all of these. All right, so default encryption using the KMS key that we created earlier. We are going to do this. It's overkill, but it's probably best practice to do it, I would say, just in case, right? Somebody makes a change somewhere. You want to make sure that you're protecting it. So now we've got it in a couple places just to be sure, and then tags. And we'll just set an output here, bucket 0. What's the value for this? What do we care about in this output? So let's go back and have a look at the main S3 bucket call. And we'll go to return values. We got a number of things here. Well, let's get the bucket name. So we can just say ref bucket 0. Okay. I will create an export for this, even though I don't think we're going to use it anywhere. And we'll just do the same thing that we did before. Sub, and then look at the AWS stack name, pseudo parameter, and I'll just call it demo bucket because we called that demo key. Okay. So bare minimum bucket with default encryption, and we've got the public access block configuration in here as well. So let's go back to our CI script, and we'll just add in a couple pieces. S3 validate. And we'll just run, for now, the really simple CloudFormation validation. Basically syntax checker. Right? And we got an extra tab in there, so there we go. And then we'll say S3 deploy. And I'm just going to steal all of this and fix the spacing. There we go. We're going to call this S3, S3. And before I forget, go back up here and say deploy S3. The rest of this got to, oh, we called it bucket, didn't we? Did I do that up here too? Yeah. Okay. The rest of this can stay the same. So let's see how well we did. Push that. And we can quickly go back here and have a look. See a failure right away. Oh, sorry, I changed. I'm like 2 weeks ago. I'm going to go here. All right, so no validation on the, or no failure on the validation. So we can go back here, refresh this, and we should see there's our demo. And we've got our completed change set. So let's have a look. It'll look just like when we did KMS. We've got an addition here of a new logical ID. And because it's the first time, there's no worry about replacements. Let's execute it and see what happens. Okay, no immediate failure again. It's usually a good sign. At least syntax, we don't have any issues there. There we go. So let's go over here, S3. Now we're going to see a weird S3 bucket name here because we let CloudFormation generate it for us, but there it is. So what you can normally see is there's their stack name, demo S3 development. Bucket 0 is the logical ID of the resource, and then CloudFormation will just jam on some sort of random character string at the end. And you can see here where we've deployed it, CA Central. Bucket and objects are not public. We'll just validate this. And if we drill down in here, new console, so we're going to have to dig around a little bit. Okay. Properties, there's the tags that we set. We've got default encryption set up. We're using server-side encryption with a KMS key, and there's the link to the key, so we're good there. We'll talk about some of these other features as we go through the rest of the series, but we're good there. Okay, and then, oh, permissions. I think it's under permissions now. There we go. So block all public access is enabled, and we've got all of the components set. So there you go. We've got our first bucket created, KMS, and account level settings for block public access. Video 1 is now in the books, and we'll release video 2 here very shortly. So get out there, build great things, folks, and we'll see you soon.